In the rugged mountains of Montana, Spirit, a magnificent black Mustang with a white blaze, became known as the most dangerous horse anyone had ever encountered after violently injuring 3 trainers and nearly killing a ranch hand. He was deemed unrideable and destined for slaughter. Meanwhile, 10-year-old Emma Coleman hadn't spoken a single word in the 14 months since the car accident that took her parents' lives retreating into her silent world at her grandfather's struggling horse sanctuary inn. Eagles Landing, what happened next, stunned everyone who witnessed it, while seasoned trainers couldn't get within 10 feet of Spirit without risking their lives. Security cameras captured the silent girl walking straight toward the feared Mustang on the very morning he was to be euthanized. As Emma reached out a small hand, the entire town held its breath. What followed not only saved Spirit's life and broke through Emma's silence, but transformed an entire community's understanding of healing, trust, and the profound connection that can form between the most unlikely souls. When everyone else has given up hope, quick pause before we continue. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The helicopter blades slice through the mountain air as Spirit and his herd scattered across the valley floor. For 4 years, he had run free in the blue mountain range, a proud stallion known by local wildlife photographers for his unusual black coat and commanding presence. Today, that freedom would end. Move them up. Don't let that black one break away, shouted a wrangler as dust clouds billowed around the panicked animal's. Spirit reared and kicked his powerful legs, striking metal panels as he was forced into a holding pen with the others. His eyes rolled white with terror, nostrils flaring, muscles trembling beneath his gleaming coat. A Bureau of Land Management officer made notes on his clipboard that one's going to be trouble. Mark him for the special training program. 6 months later, at Rocky Point Horse Auction, George Thompson shook his head as he reviewed the paperwork on the Black Mustang. 3 failed placement attempts, each ending with injured handlers. The last ranch had kept him for 2 weeks before sending him back, declaring him unmanageable after he kicked through a stall door and nearly trampled a worker. He's headed for the meat buyers tomorrow if nobody takes him. George told the tall weatherman, examining the horse from a safe distance. I'd stay back if I were you, Dr. Coleman. That one's got the devil in him. Jack Coleman squinted against the afternoon sun, studying the Mustang's rigid posture and wild eyes. At 68, the retired veterinarian had seen his share of troubled horses, but something about this one spoke to him. Perhaps it was the way the animal watched everything, intelligence burning behind the fear. How much? Jack asked, still not taking his eyes off the horse. You serious? This ain't some rescue case that needs a little TLC, Doc. This one dangerous. I didn't ask for your opinion. George the first asked how much. George named a figure far below what a horse of Spirit's caliber would normally fetch. Just cover my costs. He's your funeral. That evening, Jack sat at his kitchen table, paperwork spread before him, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. The sanctuary was already struggling financially, and taking on a potentially dangerous Mustang wasn't exactly sound business practices. Border Collie Max rested his head on Jack's knee, sensing his master's concern. What am I doing, boy? Jack sighed, scratching behind Max's ears. Rachel would have understood, but she'd been gone 5 years now. The phone's ring interrupted his thoughts. It was his daughter-in-law's sister calling from Denver with news that would further complicate his life. The paperwork came through today. Jack, Emma's social worker, says everything's set for her. Transfer to your custody next week. Jack's throat tightened. How is she the same? Still not speaking to therapists. Think a change of environment might help. They say sometimes trauma victims associate their surroundings with the event. After hanging up, Jack walked to the spare bedroom. He'd been preparing. Emma's clothes were already in the dresser, her books on the shelf. He hadn't seen his granddaughter since the funeral. Michael and Diana's car accident had left the little girl physically unharmed, but emotionally shattered. She hadn't spoken a word since waking up in a hospital to learn her parents were gone. Well, Max, he said, the dog who had followed him into the room, looks like we'll be looking after a wounded girl and a wounded horse. The following morning, May Rodriguez arrived at Horizon Hills Horse Sanctuary with her trailer at 38. She was the most respected horse trainer in 3 counties. I got your message, she said, pulling on her work gloves. Where's this problem? Mustang. Jack led her to the isolated paddock where he'd placed Spirit. Upon arriving late the previous night, the horse stood at the far corner of his body tense, watching their approach. Beautiful animal, Maya observed. BLM roundup. Jack nodded. 6 months ago. He's been through 3 failed placements, was headed to the slaughter pipeline before I got him. And you think I can work with him? She studied the Mustang's body language carefully. If anyone can, it's you. Maya didn't respond immediately, taking time to assess the situation. I'll need to observe him for a while. Before attempting any contact, let him get used to me being around for 3 hours. Maya sat on a stool outside the paddock, occasionally shifting position, but making no attempt to approach Spirit. The Mustang remained vigilant, his attention never wavering. He's different, she finally said, when Jack brought her some water. Most traumatized horses eventually resume normal behaviors when they think you're not a threat. Grazing, drinking, moving around. He hasn't taken his eyes off me once. Is that unusual? It's extreme. It's like he's cataloging everything, analyzing for threats, almost human in his assessment. She stood slowly. I'll come back tomorrow with some equipment. We'll set up a round pen inside the paddock. See if we can establish some boundaries. At night, Jack drove to the Denver airport. Emma sat silently in the passenger seat on the drive back to Eagles Landing. Her small backpack clutched her chest, her gaze fixed on the passing landscape. She had grown since he'd last seen her, but looked thin. Her long brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her blue eyes, so like her father, seemed older than her years. I've got your room already, Jack said, trying to sound cheerful. And wait till you see Max. He's gotten a bit fatter since you last visited. Emma didn't respond, but Jack hadn't expected her. The therapist had prepared him for the silence, explaining that Emma's selective mutism was a response to overwhelming trauma. She could speak. Physically, she simply didn't. I've got some new horses at the sanctuary, too, he continued, including one that just arrived yesterday, a wild Mustang named Spirit. He's having a hard time. Like you, maybe you two will understand each other at this. Emma turned slightly toward him, the first indication. She was listening. The next morning, Maya returned with Ben Davis, a former rodeo rider who volunteered at the sanctuary. Together, they assembled a round pen inside Spirit, its paddock, while the Mustang watched with suspicious eyes. I don't like this, Maya, Ben said, his voice low. I've worked with difficult horses before, but this one's reading our every move. That's why we need to establish boundaries. He needs to understand. She was interrupted by the explosive sound of Spirit charging the round pen panels, striking them with his front hooves. Both humans jumped back as the panels rattled, but held firm. Jesus, Ben exclaimed. He waited until we were distracted. No, Maya corrected, her voice calm despite her racing heart. He waited until we were vulnerable. There's a difference. From the farmhouse porch, Jack watched. With Emma beside him, the little girl's eyes were fixed on the distant paddock, her expression unreadable. That Spirit, Jack explained, the one I told you about last night. Maya's trying to help him trust humans again. Emma's gaze remained steady, watching as Maya attempted to establish a presence in the round pen, while Spirit paced the perimeter, occasionally lunging threateningly. Over the next 3 days, Maya made almost no progress. Each attempt to assert herself in Spirit's space was met with increasingly aggressive responses. After a particularly violent episode where the Mustang nearly broke through the panels, she called Jack aside. I've never seen anything like this, she admitted. Most wild horses eventually accept human presence, even if they remain cautious. He's actively fighting any attempt at socialization. What are you saying? I'm saying he might be one of the rare cases that can't be rehabilitated. Something happened to him during capture or afterward that broke his trust. Completely. Jack's face fell. So what now? I'll keep trying different approaches. But she hesitated. You should consider the possibility that he might be too dangerous to keep here if he ever got loose or someone entered a space unaware. That afternoon, Dr. James Peterson from the neighboring county came to evaluate Spirit at Jack's request. His assessment was blunt. Jack, I've worked with horses for 35 years. This animal isn't just wild. He's traumatized beyond rehabilitation. For everyone's safety, including his own, humane euthanasia might be the kindest option. I can't give up on him that quickly, Jack protested. It's not quick. He's already injured multiple handlers before coming to you. Maya's one of the best, and she's getting nowhere. What happens when he hurts someone at your sanctuary? The liability alone could shut you down. Jack had no answer, but as the men walked back toward the house, he noticed something unexpected. Emma was sitting on the grass about 30 feet from Spirit's paddock, a book open in her lap, seemingly reading. She wasn't looking at the horse, wasn't trying to interact with him in any way. Is that your granddaughter? Dr. Peterson asked. Should she be that close to him? She's well outside the safety perimeter, Jack replied, not wanting to disturb this first sign of Emma engaging with her surroundings. Let's go inside. From the kitchen window, Jack watched as Emma continued reading, occasionally turning a page. Spirit, who had been pacing restlessly, gradually slowed his movement, sometimes stopping to look at the small figure who was paying him no particular attention. That night, Sheriff Dave Hawkins pulled into Jack's driveway, his expression serious, as he approached the porch where Jack was sitting. Evening, Doc. We need to talk about that new Mustang of yours. Thomas Wilson called the department. Says He's a public danger. Jack sighed. Thomas owned the largest ranch bordering the sanctuary and had been trying to buy Jack's land for years. Spirit securely contained. Dave, no. Public access to his paddock. That's not what I heard worded as Maya Rodriguez nearly got herself killed today, and that's after he put 3 other trainers in a hospital. Wilson's worried about his cattle. If the horse gets loose, his cattle are 2 properties away. Jack, I've known you for 20 years, but I've got a responsibility to public safety. If that animal can't be managed, I'll have to issue an order. The sheriff's words hung in the air as Emma appeared in the doorway, her silent presence adding weight to the conversation. She looked from her grandfather to the sheriff, then back again, before disappearing inside. Without the sound, give me 2 weeks, Jack finally said. If I can't show progress by then, I'll make the hard decision myself. After the sheriff left, Jack found Emma sitting at the kitchen table drawing in her sketchbook. She quickly covered the page. When he entered, Emma, honey, would you like to help feed the other horses tomorrow? Not Spirit. He's not ready for that. But we have 8. Others who are very friendly. She didn't respond, but Jack noticed her gaze drift toward the window, facing Spirit's paddock, now shadowy. In the gathering dusk, something had captured his granddaughter's interest today, and for the first time since her arrival, Jack felt a small spark of hope. That night, Jack stood at his bedroom window, looking out at the sanctuary he'd built after retiring. Rachel had always wanted to rescue horses, and after her death, creating this place had kept him going. Now, with Emma silent and withdrawn, and with Spirit possibly too dangerous to save, Jack wondered if he was failing everyone who depended on him. What would you do, Rachel? He whispered to the empty room. How do I help them both? Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So, if you are enjoyed, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Dawn broke over Horizon Hills Horse Sanctuary, painting the Montana sky in streaks of gold and pink. Jack rose early as old bones, protesting as he pulled on his work boots through the kitchen window. He spotted Emma, already outside, sitting in the same spot as yesterday, a comfortable distance from Spirit's paddock. Her sketchbook lay open on her lap. Jack prepared her breakfast and brought it outside on a tray. Morning, sweetheart. Thought you might be hungry. Emma didn't acknowledge him, her pencil moving steadily across the paper. Jack placed a tray beside her and glanced at the drawing, surprisingly detailed sketch of Spirit. Standing alert, his muscles tense, mane flowing, child had captured something essential about the Mustang, a wildness, but also an intelligence in the eyes that Jack himself had noticed. That's very good, Emma. You've got a Spirit down perfectly. He paused. That's why I named him that. You know something about his eyes. Emma continued drawing, as if she hadn't heard, but her shoulders relaxed slightly. Jack left her Arton, went about his morning chores, feeding the other rescue horses and cleaning stalls. When May arrived an hour later, he motioned her toward Emma. She's been there since sunrise. He explained quietly, won't come inside, won't respond when I talk to her, but she's drawing him. Maya studied the scene with professional interest. And how's he responding? That's the thing. He's not charging the fence or pacing like usual. He's just watching her. Interesting. Maya crossed her arms. Mind if I observe for a bit before I try working with him again? From a distance, they watched as Emma occasionally glanced up at Spirit, then returned to her drawing. The horse remained at the far side of the paddock, but kept his attention fixed on the child. Neither made any attempt to approach the other. There's something happening here, Maya said finally. I can't explain it, but they're communicating somehow. Let's hold off on my session today. I don't want to disrupt whatever this is. By mid-morning, Emma finally stood gathering her sketchbook and the untouched breakfast tray as she turned to walk back to the house. Spirit moved for the first time, taking several steps toward the fence before stopping. His ears pricked forward. Later that afternoon, Thomas Wilson's truck kicked up dust as it rolled down the sanctuary's driveway. Jack stepped out onto the porch, wiping his hands on a rag. Thomas, what brings you? By Wilson, a tall man with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades under Montana's sun, removed his hat despite his courteous gesture. His eyes remained cold. Heard about your new acquisition, the killer Mustang that's got Maya Rodriguez spooked. Word travels fast in Eagle's Landing. Jack replied, his tone neutral. Small towns. Wilson shrugged. Look, Jack, I've kept quiet about this sanctuary of yours, even though you're driving down property values with your collection of broken down horses. But bringing in a dangerous animal is where I draw the fine. Jack bristled. Spirit is securely contained. He poses no threat to you or your property today. Maybe what about when he breaks through that flimsy fencing you've got, or when he injures someone and a lawsuit shuts you down? Wilson replaced his hat. I've got a buyer interested in this whole valley, my land, yours, and the Henderson placed premium prices well above market value. I've told you before, Thomas, this sanctuary isn't for sale. You're not getting any younger, Jack. That granddaughter of yours needs stability, not failing horse rescue. Weighing her down, Wilson's gaze drifted toward Emma, who had returned to her spot near Spirit's paddock. What happens to those horses? When you can't care for them anymore, you really think that mute child can take over Jack's? Hands clenched into fists. I think you should leave. Now Wilson nodded toward Emma's sheriff. Tells me she hasn't spoken since the accident. Tragic thing, might say. It was the same way after her mother passed. Wouldn't talk for months. Different kind of trauma. But kids are resilient. She came around eventually. His tone softened slightly. The offer stands, Jack. Think about it for her sake. After Wilson left, Jack approached Emma, who was once again sketching. Spirit had moved closer to the fence than Jack had ever seen, though still maintaining a cautious distance. Emma, honey, it's getting hot out here. Why don't you come inside for a while? The girl ignored him, focused on her drawing Jack's side, and settled on the grass beside her, careful to move slowly. You know your grandmother Rachel always wanted a place like this. She grew up riding, but her family lost their farm when she was about your age. She never got another horse until we were married. 20 years later, he gazed across the sanctuary when she got sick. She made me promise to build this place, said every horse deserves a second chance. Emma's pencil paused momentarily. I think Spirit deserves that chance too, Jack continued, but he's making it mighty difficult to help him. He glanced at her drawing. You seem to understand him better than any of us for the first time since her arrival. Emma turned to look directly at her grandfather. Her blue eyes held a question she wouldn't voice. Yes, Jack said, answering her unspoken thoughts. Some people want me to put him down, say he's too dangerous. Emma's eyes widened slightly, and she turned back toward Spirit. The Mustang was standing completely still, watching them. I don't want to give up on him, Jack said softly, but I don't know how to reach him. The next morning, Marcus Johnson from the Eagles Landing Gazette arrived at the sanctuary as the town's only journalist. He covered everything from high school football to town council meetings. Appreciate you agreeing to the interview, Doc, he said, notebook in hand. Community's buzzing about your new Mustang. Thought we should get the facts straight. Jack led him toward the barn, deliberately avoiding Spirit's paddock, where Emma had once again taken up her position. Not much to tell. He's a wild horse. That's a bad experience as we humans were working with him. I heard Maya Rodriguez quit yesterday. He said he was untrainable. Jack stopped walking. Who told you that? Small town Marcus replied with a shrug. So it's true Maya's taking a different approach. We're exploring alternatives. Marcus glanced toward Emma. And Spirit is that your granddaughter, should she be that close to him, she's at a safe distance, Jack replied firmly, and she seems to have a common effect on the journalist. Made a note, interesting angle, silent girl. Sue Savage Stallion. This isn't a human interest story, Marcus, that a traumatized child and a frightened animal. Neither one is a headline. Marcus lowered his notebook, genuine concern crossing his face. Sorry, Doc, no disrespect intended, but people are talking and Thomas Wilson's been pretty vocal about the danger. A balanced story might actually help your case. After showing Marcus the rest of the sanctuary and explaining the rehabilitation work they did, Jack walked him back to his car. Just make sure your readers understand that Spirit isn't a monster. He's an animal that's been mishandled and needs on time. I'll be fair, Marcus promised. One last question, though. What happens if you can't rehabilitate him? Jack didn't answer. Immediately, his gaze drifting toward Emma and Spirit. The distance between them seemed to have decreased slightly, though neither had approached the other. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. That evening, Dr. Sarah Miller arrived from the State University, where she specialized in equine behavior. Jack had reached out to her after Maya's latest assessment. I might have reviewed the file you sent, she said, as they watched Spirit from the observation platform. Jack had built his aggression patterns are unusual. Typically, even traumatized Mustangs show predictable triggers, sudden movements, direct eye contact approach from behind. Spirit seems to react negatively to any human presence regardless of behavior, except Emma. Jack noted he tolerates her. Dr. Miller observed the girl, who is now reading a book, her back partially turned to the paddock. How long has she been doing this? 3 days. Now she sits there for hours, doesn't try to approach him, doesn't call to him, just exists in his space, and he accepts it. Sarah made notes on her tablet. This could be significant. What's Emma's background with horses? None. Really, she visited a few times when she was younger, but just for short periods. Rachel would lead her around on our gentlest. Yet she shows no fear him. Jack considered this no caution, respect, maybe, but not fear. It's everyone else she withdraws from. Dr. Miller nodded thoughtfully. There's a concept in psychology called parallel processing, two beings existing alongside each other, not directly interacting, but still communicating through shared space, and an energy it's often used in therapy for trauma patients who aren't ready for direct engagement. You think that's what they're doing, processing their traumas together. I think she said carefully that they recognize something in each other. Your granddaughter isn't trying to change Spirit or make him do anything. She's just being with him. That might be exactly what he needs right now. The next day brought rain-heavy drops pounding against the tin roof of the barn where Jack sorted. Through months of neglected paperwork, the sanctuary's finances were worse than he'd remembered. Feed costs had increased, donations had decreased, and the veterinary bills for several recent rescues had depleted their emergency fund, taking on Spirit. And now Emma had stretched resources. Even thinner, a knock at the barn door interrupted his gloomy calculations. CLA Wilson stood in the doorway, rain dripping from her jacket miss. "Wilson, Jack," said surprise coming out of that downpour. CLA stepped inside. Removing her hood at 32, she had her father's height, but none of his hardness. Her gentle manner with animals had always impressed Jack on the few occasions they'd met at community events. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, glancing at the paperwork scattered across the desk. "Just fighting a losing battle with arithmetic." Jack replied, "What brings you out in this weather?" Celia hesitated. "I heard about your Mustang and about your granddaughter." She reached into her bag and pulled out a book. "When I stopped speaking after my mother died, this helped me. I thought maybe." Jack took the offered item, a handsomely illustrated book about a girl and a wild horse. "That's very kind of you. I also wanted to apologize to my father. He doesn't speak for all of us." She looked around the barn with genuine appreciation. "What you built here is special, Dr. Coleman. The way you give these animals a second chance when everyone else has given up on them. Call me Jack. And thank you for saying that. It means a lot, especially." Now Claire nodded toward the financial paperwork. "Times are tough. Nothing we haven't weathered before," Jack said, though his tone lacked conviction. "Have you considered educational program? Pram school visits, workshops on horse care, that sort of thing. The ranch where I volunteer runs them, and they bring in decent revenue." "Hadn't thought about it," Jack admitted. "Not sure I have the energy for school groups. At my age, you wouldn't have to do it alone." CLA's eyes brightened with enthusiasm. "I have experience running those programs. I can help get things started." Maybe even the barn door flew open, and Ben rushed in, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. "Jack, you better come quick, Emma." She's moved closer to Spirit's paddock, right up against the fence. Jack's heart lurched. He grabbed his coat and hurried outside, clear close behind to the curtain of rain. He could make out Emma's small figure standing at the fence line, her yellow raincoat bright against the gray day. Spirit was no more than 15 feet away, the closest he'd come to any human since arriving. "Don't call out," Dr. Miller warned, appearing beside them under an umbrella. "Don't do anything to startle either of them." They watched in tense silence as Emma slowly raised her hand, not reaching through the fence, but simply lifting it in Spirit's direction. The Mustang's ears flicked forward, his nostrils flaring, as he caught her scent on the rain-washed air. For a long, breathless moment, horse and child regarded each other across the shrinking divide of space. In fear, then Spirit lowered his proud head, slightly not in submission, but in acknowledgement, before turning and trotting to the far side of the paddock. "What just happened, Jack?" whispered Progress. Dr. Miller replied, "Simply the first real progress anyone's made with him." Later, after Emma had been coaxed inside and given dry clothes and hot chocolate, Jack found her looking at the book Claire had brought. She ran her fingers over the illustration of the wild horse on its cover. "That was a kind gift from M. Wilson," Jack said, settling into the chair across from her. "She went through something similar to you when she was young." Didn't speak for a long time after losing her mother. Emma looked up, her expression questioning. "Yes, she speaks now," Jack answered, once again reading his granddaughter's unvoiced thought. She found her way back to words in her own time. Emma returned her attention to the book, opening it to the first page. Jack watched her for a moment, then ventured a question. "What is it you see in Spirit, Emma? What made you want to stand so close today?" The girl didn't respond verbally, but she closed the book and reached for her sketch pad, flipping through several pages of Spirit drawings. She stopped at one that showed the Mustang looking directly at the viewer, his eyes rendered with remarkable detail. For a child's drawing, Emma pointed to his eyes, then to her own. "You see yourself in him," Jack said softly. Emma nodded, the simple gesture carrying the weight of her first deliberate communication. A week had passed since Emma's first approach to Spirit's fence. Each day followed a similar pattern. The girl would sit near the paddock, sometimes reading, sometimes drawing, gradually moving her position closer. Spirit remained cautious, but no longer showed signs of aggression. When she was present, Jack stood at the kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching Emma in her now familiar spot, Dr. Miller had set up several trail cameras to document the interactions, however minimal. They might seem any change today, Maya asked, joining at the window. Despite her initial skepticism, she had continued visiting the sanctuary, fascinated by the developing dynamic. Hard to tell, Jack replied, but Dr. Miller says the footage shows Spirit's stress behaviors, decreasing his muscle tension, ear position, even his breathing rate, all showing improvement. When Emma's present, Maya nodded. I saw the difference yesterday. When I approached the paddock alone, he went straight to threat poo. When I walked with Emma, he just watched us using a child. As a buffer, isn't exactly a training technique I'm comfortable with. Jack admitted that's not what this is, Maya. Corrected, Emma isn't a tool or a shield. She's the only one who approached him without expectations. The rest of us, me included, always wanted something from him: compliance, submission, performance. She just offers presence outside. Emma opened her book, seemingly absorbed in her reading. Spirit grazed nearby, closer to the fence than ever before, occasionally lifting his head to glance in her direction. The ringing of the telephone interrupted their observation. Jack answered to find Lisa Martinez, the social worker assigned Emma's case, on the line. Mr. Coleman, I'm calling to schedule our first home visit. It's standard procedure for the first 6 months of a custody transition. Jack arranged for her to come the following day, then hung up with a worried expression. Problem, Maya asked Emma's social worker, is visiting tomorrow. I haven't told her about Emma's interest in Spirit. Maya raised an eyebrow. You think she'd object? I think a government official. Maya concerns about a mute child spending hours near a horse deemed dangerous by multiple professionals. Then maybe don't mention that part. Maya suggested pragmatically focus on progress Emma's making, engaging with her environment, communicating through art, showing interest in something. Those are all positive developments. The next morning, Jack found Emma at the kitchen table, early, dressed and clean. Clothes, her hair neatly brushed, the first time she'd attended to her appearance. Without prompting, you remember Miss Martinez is coming today? Jack asked, surprised by the child's initiative. Emma nodded, pushing a piece of paper across the table. It was a drawing of Spirit standing calmly at the fence, while a small figure, clearly Emma, stood nearby. Is this something you want to show her? Another nod. Jack smiled. I think that's a fine idea. When Lisa Martinez arrived, her professional demeanor was softened by genuine concern for Emma's well-being. She spent time observing the girl in the house, reviewing her living arrangements and discussing her schooling options with Jack. The psychologist reports indicate Emma's selective mutism is situational rather than physiological. Lisa explained her vocal cords and speech mechanisms are intact. It's her psychological response to trauma that's blocking verbal communication. Is there anything specific I should be doing? Jack asked. Therapy techniques or exercises. The most important thing is creating a safe, stable environment where she feels secure enough to eventually speak again. Has she shown any progress in other forms of communication? Writing, drawing, gestures? Jack nodded toward Emma, who was showing Lisa her sketchbook. She's been drawing constantly, and she started responding to questions with nods or head shakes. Small steps, but definite progress from when she arrived. Lisa leafed through the sketchbook, pausing at the numerous drawings of Spirit. She seems fixated on this horse. Is it one of yours? Yes, a recent rescue. Emma's taken a special interest in him. Jack chose his words carefully. She spends time near his paddock, observing him. The routine seems to comfort her. That's actually quite positive, Lisa remarked. Finding something to connect with is an important step in trauma recovery. She closed the sketchbook. I'd like to see the rest of the property. If that's all right, get a full picture of Emma's daily environment. Jack's shoulders tense, of course. As they walked the sanctuary grounds, Jack deliberately took a route that kept him distant from Spirit's paddock. He pointed out the other rescue horses, the barn, and the small garden Rachel had started years ago. That he still maintained. This is a wonderful setting for a child. Lisa commented. Fresh air, animals, nature, all proven therapeutic elements. They were heading back toward the house when Emma suddenly appeared on the path ahead of them, gesturing insistently for them to follow her. Emma, Ms. Martinez and I were just finishing up our tour, Jack said, anxiety creeping into his voice. But Emma continued, gesturing, her expression determined. Lisa glanced at Jack curiously. She seems to want to show us something. The social worker observed. Let's follow her lead. Self-initiated communication should be encouraged. With no choice but comply, Jack followed as Emma LED'd them directly to Spirit's paddock. The Mustang was standing near the fence, his posture alert, but not aggressive. Emma pointed proudly between herself and the horse. Is this the horse from her drawings? Lisa asked, keeping her voice low. Yes, Jack admitted. Spirit. He's had a difficult adjustment. Emma picked up a stick and carefully scratched in the dirt. Me and Spirit friends. Lisa crouched down at Emma's level. You and Spirit are friends. That's wonderful, Emma. The girl nodded vigorously, then wrote, He's scared like me. Jack held his breath, watching Lisa's reaction carefully to his relief. She seemed genuinely moved. You understand each other, Lisa said softly. Sometimes. That's all we need, someone who understands without words. As they spoke, Spirit approached the fence, stopping about 10 feet away, still cautious. But interested, Emma looked at him, then back at Lisa, her expression serious as. She scratched more words. He needs time, yes, Lisa. Agreed. Healing takes time. Later, after Lisa had departed with a positive assessment of Emma's living situation, Jack found his granddaughter back at her usual spot by the fence. That was a brave thing you did today, he told her, showing Miss Martinez your special connection with Spirit. Emma looked up from her book. Her expression was suddenly worried. She mimed writing, and Jack handed her the small notepad he'd taken to carrying. She wrote quickly. Will they take Spirit away? The question caught Jack off guard. Who told you someone might take Spirit away? Emma wrote again. I heard you talking with the doctor. Jack sighed. Some people think Spirit might be too dangerous to rehabilitate, but that's not going to happen now. You're proving them wrong, showing that he can form connections. Emma's face relaxed slightly, but she wrote, one more question. Promise? I promise, Jack said firmly. Spirit stays with us as long as he's making progress, and thanks to you, he definitely is. The following morning brought more visitors to Horizon Hills. Dr. Miller arrived with camera equipment and a colleague who specialized in animal-assisted therapy for trauma patients. Jack, this is Olivia Parker, Dr. Miller introduced. She works with children who've experienced trauma, often using animals as part of the therapeutic process. Olivia, a warm woman in her mid-30s, shook Jack's hand. Dr. Miller has told me about Emma and Spirit. If you're open to it, I'd like to observe their interaction from a therapeutic perspective. Will this help? Emma, Jack asked directly. It might, Olivia replied honestly, but I'm equally interested in how it could help other children. This type of spontaneous connection is rare and valuable to document. After getting Jack's permission, the two professionals set up their observation posts at a distance that wouldn't disturb Emma or Spirit. Jack went about his chores, occasionally checking on them from afar. Around mid-morning, he spotted Thomas Wilson's truck pulling in again, this time accompanied by Sheriff Hawkins. Patrol car. Jack's stomach tightened as he walked over to meet them. Thomas, Sheriff. What's this about? Dave Hawkins removed his hat, looking uncomfortable. Got a complaint about the Mustang. Jack, Thomas here says he's becoming more aggressive, posing an increased risk. Jack struggled to maintain his composure. That's simply not true. Spirit's showing improvement daily. That's not what I've observed. Thomas counted. Yesterday evening, I was checking my fence line along your property. That animal charged the fence when he saw me, nearly broke through. You were on my property. Jack demanded. I was on the boundary line, which I have every right to inspect. Thomas replied smoothly. Point is that horse is a liability. Jack, only a matter of time before he hurts someone. Sheriff Hawkins interjected. I'm not taking sides here, but I need to follow up on any safety complaint. Mind if I take a look at the Mustang's enclosure, make sure it's secure? Fine, Jack agreed. Turley, but we need to stay back. Emma's working with him right now, and I don't want to disturb him. The child is with that dangerous animal. Thomas asked incredulously. Dave, that's endangerment plain and simple. She's outside the paddock, completely safe. Jack clarified his patience, wearing thin, and she's under professional supervision. He nodded toward Dr. Miller and Olivia, who were still observing from their position. The sheriff followed Jack's gaze. Is that Sarah Miller from a university? What's she doing here? Documenting a breakthrough case of animal human connection for trauma recovery. Jack, EXP, explained. Emma and Spirit are helping each other heal. As they approached, keeping a respectful distance, the sheriff could see Emma sitting near the fence, reading aloud from a book, her voice barely audible, but unmistakably present. Spirit stood nearby, his ears pricked forward, listening. She's speaking. Dave whispered, aware of Emma's condition from community discussions to the horse. First word since the accident. Jack confirmed, emotion thick in his throat. Started yesterday, only with Spirit so far, but Dr. Parker says it's a significant breakthrough. Thomas Wilson's expression remained skeptical, but even he seemed affected by the scene. Reading to a horse doesn't make him safe. Jack, maybe not. Sheriff Hawkins conceded, but I'm not seeing an imminent threat here. The paddock looks secure, and the animal isn't showing aggression. I'll note your complaint, Thomas, but there's no cause for intervention. At this point, Wilson's jaw tightened. This isn't over, Coleman. That animal's dangerous regardless of your granddaughter's storybook sessions. After the men departed, Jack approached Dr. Miller and Olivia, who were reviewing footage on a laptop. Everything all right? Dr. Miller asked, noting Jack's troubled expression. Wilson's trying to force my hand with Spirit. Jack explained, claims he's becoming more dangerous, not less. That contradicts our data, Dr. Miller said, turning the laptop to show Jack. We've been measuring Spirit's physiological stress markers Through infrared imaging, his comfort zone, the distance at which he shows minimal stress around humans, has expanded significantly with Emma. It's now down to about 8 feet with other familiar humans like you or Maya. About 20 feet a month ago, it was 50 feet. For everyone Thomas was likely at a boundary still well within Spirit's defensive perimeter, Olivia, added a horse, would naturally perceive that as threatening. Jack nodded, then glanced toward Emma, who was still reading softly to Spirit Cheese. Actually speaking, I can hardly believe it, Olivia smiled. Children often find it easy to talk to animals first. They're non-judgmental listeners. The fact that she's reading aloud to Spirit means she trusts him completely. But why him, Jack? Wondered why form that bond with the most traumatized, dangerous horse in the sanctuary. Because Olivia said thoughtfully, they recognize themselves in each other, both experience profound trauma, both lost their freedom and security, both struggle to trust. Emma doesn't look at Spirit and see a dangerous horse. She sees a kindred spirit who understands her pain. Without words, the next day brought a heavy thunderstorm. Jack insisted Emma stay inside, despite her clear desire to check on Spirit. By mid-afternoon, the storm had intensified with lightning flashing across the valley and thunder rattling the windows. He'll be fine, Jack assured her as she pressed her face against the glass, looking anxiously toward Spirit's paddock. He has shelter in the ruined shed, but Emma wasn't convinced. She wrote on her notepad, he's afraid of loud noises. Most horses don't like storms, Jack acknowledged, but they weather them just fine. A particularly violent thunderclap shook the house. Emma's eyes widened in alarm, and she bolted for the door. Jack caught her arm. Emma, no, it's dangerous out there. She struggled against his grip, tears forming in her eyes, the first emotional outburst Jack had seen from her. When he wouldn't relent, she grabbed her notepad and wrote frantically. Helicopters reminds him of captured. Jack stared at the words, suddenly understanding the thunder. It sounded like the helicopters they use to round up his herd. Emma nodded urgently. Jack weighed his responsibility to keep his granddaughter safe against the progress they might lose if Spirits suffered a fear-induced setback. Will and check the cameras. He decided, leading Emma to his office where they could access the trail camera feeds remotely. The screen showed Spirit in a state of panic, running back and forth along the fence line, refusing to enter the shelter. As they watched, a particularly powerful lightning strike illuminated the entire paddock, followed immediately by an explosive thunderclap. Spirit reared in terror, then charged blindly, crashing hard into the fence. He's going to hurt himself, Jack muttered, grabbing his rein. Gears, stay here, Emma. I mean it this time. But as he turned toward the door, he found Emma already dressed in her yellow raincoat, her expression resolute. She wrote, quickly, he needs me. Jack recognized the futility of arguing. You stay behind me the entire time. If I say run, you run. Understood. Emma nodded solemnly. They battled their way through the downpour wind, driving the rain sideways into their faces. When they reached Spirit's paddock, the situation was worse than Jack had feared. The Mustang was bleeding from a cut above his eye where he'd struck the fence, and he was still charging around, blindly driven by terror. Spirit, Jack called, but his voice was lost in the storm. Emma stepped forward, ignoring Jack's attempt to hold her back. Rather than approaching the fence directly, she moved to the gate and unlatched it. Emma, no. Jack lunged for her, but it was too late. The gate swung open, and Emma stepped into the paddock with the panicked Mustang. Time seemed to stand still. As Emma stepped into the paddock, Jack's shout was drowned by another crash of thunder. As he rushed toward the gate, rain belted down, reducing visibility to mere yards through the gray curtain of water. He could see Spirit wheeling around, nostrils flaring, as he detected a human presence in his space. Emma, Jack's voice broke with fear. Don't move. But Emma wasn't listening. Instead of freezing or retreating, she moved deliberately toward the center of the paddock, her yellow raincoat a bright beacon in the storm. Spirits snorted, pouring the muddy ground, his eyes rolling with terror and confusion. Jack reached the gate, ready to dash in and grab his granddaughter when Dr. Miller's hand CL lamp down on his arm. She'd apparently followed him from the house. Wait. She commanded, don't make it worse. She's in there with a panicked horse. Jack tried to wrench free. Look at what she's doing, Dr. Miller insisted. Emma had stopped about 20 feet from Spirit. Instead of approaching directly, she slowly sat down in the mud, making herself small and unthreatening. Then she began to sing a soft, simple lullaby that had been her mother's favorite. Her voice, and used for so long, was raspy but clear enough to carry through the storm. Spirit's frantic movement slowed. His ears, previously pinned back in fear, swiveled forward to catch the unfamiliar sound. The singing created a bubble of calm in the chaos of the storm. She's disrupting his panic pattern, Dr. Miller explained, her voice low, giving him something else to focus on besides the thunder. Jack watched his heart, his throat, as Spirit took one hesitant step toward Emma, then another. The cut above his eye was still bleeding mixing with rainwater as it ran down his face, but his breathing had slowed. Emma continued singing, never moving from her spot, allowing the Mustang to approach at his own pace. When Spirit was about 10 feet away, he stopped, nostrils flaring. As he took in her scent, Emma slowly raised one hand, palm up, not reaching for him, but offering connection. Another lightning flash illuminated the scene, followed by booming thunder. Spirit flinched, but didn't bolt. She's inside his flight distance. Dr. Miller whispered, but he's not running for what? Seemed an eternity. Horse and child remained in this tableau, connected by the thread of Emma's song. Then, as the storm began to ease, Spirit lowered his head and took the final steps toward Emma. His muzzle hovered inches from her outstretched hand, his breath visible in the cool, rain-washed air. "Don't move, Jack," breathed, though Emma couldn't hear him. "Let him come to you." As if hearing her grandfather's thoughts, Emma remained perfectly still, her hand steady despite the rain and wind. Spirit's nostrils flared once more, and then so gently it almost didn't register. He touched his muzzle to her palm. The first touch. Jack let out the breath he'd been holding, tears mixing with raindrops on his weathered face. Dr. Miller squeezed his arm, her scientific detachment momentarily forgotten in the face of this breakthrough. In 30 years of Owen behavioral work, she murmured, "I've never seen anything like this." The storm continued to recede. The now a distant rumble. Emma slowly rose to her feet, her hand maintaining contact with Spirit's muzzle. The Mustang didn't pull away or show signs of aggression. Instead, he seemed almost relieved, as if a great burden had been lifted. With her free hand, Emma gently reached up toward the cut on Spirit's face. He tensed, but allowed her to examine the wound. "We need to treat that cut," Jack called softly, not wanting to break the spell, but concerned about infection. Emma looked toward her grandfather and nodded, then turned back to Spirit. She stroked his neck once, then stepped away, giving him space. To Jack's amazement, the horse followed her as she walked slowly toward the gate. "Keep the halter and lead out of sight," Dr. Miller warned as Jack prepared to enter the paddock. "Any equipment might trigger defensive responses." Jack nodded and approached with empty hands, moving slowly, and Deliel. Spirit watched him wearily, but didn't retreat. Emma stood between them, a bridge between worlds. "Hey there, big fellow," Jack said softly. "That's quite a cut. You got mind if we take care." At Spirit's ears flicked forward at Jack's voice, uncertain, but not fearful. Emma reached out and took her grandfather's hand, then placed it gently on Spirit's neck alongside her own. The Mustang trembled, but stood his ground, accepting for the first time the touch of a second human back at the barn. Maya arrived to find a scene she could scarcely believe. Spirit stood in the barn aisle, untied and unrestrained, while Jack carefully cleaned the cut above his eye. Emma remained at the horse's shoulder, her hand resting lightly on his neck, singing softly whenever he showed signs of anxiety. "What happened?" Maya whispered to Dr. Miller, who was documenting everything with her camera. "A perfect storm." Literally and figuratively, the behaviorist replied. Emma went into the paddock during the thunderstorm. Instead of triggering his aggression, she became his anchor. He's accepted her completely, and through her, he's cautiously accepting Jack. Maya shook her head in wonder. "I've spent my life gentling Mustangs, never seen one transition from aggressive to accepting this quickly." "It's not quick," Dr. Miller corrected. "It's been building since the first day." Emma sat near his paddock. She had the patience to let him set the pace. After treating Spirit's wound, the question became whether to return him to his paddock or try moving him to a stall for the night. Traditional wisdom would suggest returning him to familiar territory, but Emma had other ideas. She tugged Jack's sleeve and pointed to an empty stall near where Daisy, the gentle older mare, was housed. "You think he should stay inside tonight?" Jack asked. Emma nodded vigorously. "That's a big step, sweetheart. He's never been in a confined space willingly, but..." Emma's expression was resolute. She wrote on her ever-present notepad, "He trusts me. I'll stay with him." Jack exchanged glances with Maya and Dr. Miller. "Is that even possible? Safe theoretically?" "Yes," Dr. Miller said cautiously. His body language shows no aggression toward Emma, but it's unprecedented to have this level of trust so suddenly with a horse this traumatized. It's not sudden to the Maya observed. They've been building this relationship for weeks, just not physically. In the end, they prepared the stall with fresh bedding, water, and hay, then allowed Em to lead Spirit inside. She simply walked forward, and the Mustang followed, as if drawn by an invisible thread. At the stall door, he hesitated, instinctive caution at the confined space where, with his newfound trust, Emma stepped inside and waited. After a tense moment, Spirit followed her, and his nostrils flaring as he investigated the new environment. "We'll leave the top half of the door open," Jack decided, lest he'll feel trapped for the next hour. They took turns watching as Emma sat on a small stool in the corner of the stall, reading aloud from the book Soleil had given her. Spirit alternated between investigating the stall and returned to stand near Emma, drawing comfort from her presence. "She can't stay in there all night," Jack finally said. "Agreed," Dr. Miller replied. "But I think he's settled enough now that she can leave. The important thing is that he came involuntarily when it was time for Emma to go." She stood slowly and stroked Spirit's neck. She whispered something in his ear that none of the adults could hear, then walked out of the stall. Spirit watched her go, but made no attempt to follow or escape. Instead, he lowered his head and began to eat the hay. His body language relaxed despite the unfamiliar surroundings. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Jack rose early, anxiety about Spirit driving him to check the barn before even making coffee. He found Emma already there, sitting on a bale outside the stall. Spirit stood at the half door, his head hanging over the edge. "Near her morning, you," to Jack said softly. "Everyone's asleep." Emma nodded, a small smile lighting her face. The first Jack had seen since her arrival at the sanctuary. "How about our patient?" Jack approached, carefully noting that Spirit watched him but showed none of yesterday's weariness. The cut above the horses, "I look clean with no signs of infection." As Jack reached out slowly to examine the wound, Spirit allowed the touch without flinching. Jack felt a lump form in his throat. After weeks of violent rejection, the Mustang was accepting human contact. "You did it, Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You found a way to reach him when none of us could." Emma shook her head and wrote, "He reached me too over breakfast." Jack called Dr. Miller to report the night's success. "He's still in the stall, calm as can be. Even let me check his wound without sedation." "That's remarkable progress," Dr. Miller replied. "I'd like to document his interactions today. If that's all right, this case could revolutionize our approaches to traumatized Mustangs." "Of course," Jack agreed. "And I want to thank you for stopping me yesterday. If I'd rushed in, you were being a protective grandfather." Dr. Miller said kindly. Emma was being an intuitive healer. Both roles were necessary. After hanging up, Jack noticed Emma writing intently at the table. She pushed a notepad toward him. "Can I show Spirit the sanctuary today?" "You mean lead him around outside the paddock?" Jack clarified, surprised. Emma nodded eagerly. "That's a big step," Jack cautioned. "He's only just accepted being handled." Emma wrote again. "He needs to see it safe here." "All of it," Jack considered the request. Conventional wisdom would suggest moving much more slowly, but conventional wisdom hadn't predicted any of Spirit's progress. "So far, all right," decided, "but with precautions. We'll use a lead rope, and Maya or I will be with you the entire time." When Maya arrived and heard the plan, she was skeptical but intrigued. "You're sure about this?" "One loud noise, one sudden movement, and he could bolt with Emma, potentially in the way." "I know the risks," Jack acknowledged, "but Emma understands him in ways we don't if she thinks he's ready." They prepared carefully, selecting a quiet time of day when few vehicles would be passing on a nearby road. Maya brought her softest cotton lid rope and showed Emma how to hold it properly, loose enough to avoid pressure on Spirit's sensitive face, but secure enough to maintain connection. "Remember," Maya instructed, "if he spooks, drop the rope immediately. Your safety comes first." Emma nodded solemnly, though her excitement was evident in her bright eyes. At the stall, Spirit greeted Emma with a soft, nickering sound. The first vocalization he'd made that wasn't rooted in fear or aggression. Maya demonstrated how to attach the lead rope to Spirit's halter, moving slowly and explaining each step. "Now you try," she encouraged Emma. The girl confidently secured the lead, and Spirit lowered his head cooperatively, as if understanding the lesson. With the door fully open, Emma LED Spirit into the barn. The Mustang steps were hesitant, his eyes darting around the unfamiliar space. But he followed Emma willingly. Jack and Mir walked a few paces behind, ready to intervene if necessary. But Spirit remained calm, drawing confidence from Emma's steady presence. They moved out into the morning sunshine, and Spirit raised his head, nostrils flaring as he took in the sense of the sanctuary. Emma led him first to the small garden, where butterflies danced among late summer blooms. Spirit watched the fluttering insects with pricked ears, curious rather than fearful. Next, they walked past the paddocks, where other rescue horses grazed. Several nickered in greeting, and Spirit responded tentatively. Social instincts beginning to override learned fear. "He's remembering how to be a horse," Maya whispered to Jack. Not just a survivor. Their peaceful tour was interrupted by the sound of an approaching vehicle. Spirit's head shot up, muscles tensing as Thomas Wilson's truck appeared at the end of the driveway. "Perfect timing," Jack muttered sarcastically. Emma sensed Spirit's anxiety and immediately moved to his shoulder, stroking his neck and whispering reassurances. The Mustang remained alert, but didn't bolt as the truck parked and Thomas emerged, followed by his daughter, Claire. "Well, I'll be damned," Thomas said, stopping in his tracks at the sight of the supposedly dangerous Mustang being led by a small child. "How do you manage that?" Jack, before Jack could respond, CLA hurried forward, her face out light with wonder. "Dad, look, it's Incredible stay back, Jack warned. He's still adjusting to being handled. CLA. Stop respecting the boundary, Emma. That's amazing. He trusts you completely. Emma smiled shyly and nodded. Thomas approached more cautiously, his skeptical expression giving way to grudging respect. Got to admit, I didn't think it was possible that Horace put 3 men in the hospital before he came here. Emma had the patience we all lacked, Jack explained. She gave him time to overcome his fear. CLA knelt to Emma's level. Is it okay if I come a little closer? I brought something that might help with his training. After receiving Emma's nod, CLA slowly approached, reaching into her pocket to produce several apple slices. May I? She asked, holding them out. Emma accepted the offering and showed Spirit the treat on her flattened palm. The Mustang sniffed cautiously, then delicately took an apple slice, his lips tickling Emma's hand. When he'd finished, Emma gestured for Claire to try with. Steady hands, Claire offered an apple slice. Spirit hesitated longer, but eventually accepted the treat from this new person, his third human contact in as many days. Thomas watched the interaction with a complex expression. Jack, can we talk privately for a moment? The men walked a short distance away, leaving the horses in Maya's capable supervision. What's on your mind? Thomas, Jack asked wearily. I came here today to tell you the county approved my petition for a safety review of your sanctuary. Thomas admitted, specifically regarding that Mustang. Jack's jaw tightened. And now I'm withdrawing it. Thomas gazed back at Emma. And Spirit, I spent 40 years working with horses, and I've never seen anything like what that child just did. She has a gift. Jack agreed. More than that, she is proof that your sanctuary works. Thomas removed his hat, a gesture of respect. My offer to buy your land still stands. Business is business, but I won't try to force your hand over safety concerns anymore. Jack extended his hand. I appreciate that. Thomas, as they shook, a remarkable sound drifted across the sanctuary. Emma's laughter, bright and clear as Spirit nuzzled her pockets for more apple slices. It was the first time Jack had heard his granddaughter laugh since before the accident. Sounds like you got 2 success stories on your hands, Thomas observed. Jack nodded, emotion making it difficult to speak. They save each other. The story of Emma and Spirit spread quickly through Eagle's Landing. Marcus Johnson's article in the local Gazette portrayed the relationship as nothing short of miraculous, a silent child and a dangerous horse finding healing together. By the weekend, curious towns people were driving slowly past the sanctuary, hoping for a glimpse of the likely pair. We should be charging admission, Maya joked as she helped Jack repair fencing in Spirit's paddock, now empty, as the Mustang spent his days in stall or being led around the sanctuary by Emma. I don't want them becoming a sideshow, Jack replied. Emma is still fragile in spirits. Progress is tentative. Speaking of progress, Maya said, nodding toward the barn where Emma was brushing Spirit in the aisle. Have you thought about what next for them? Jack paused, leaning on the fence. Puss, what do you mean? Every rehabilitation has goals. Jack, Spirit has made incredible strides, accepting handling, leading, grooming. But what's the end goal? Will Emma eventually ride, and will he join the other horses in the communal paddock, or will he always need special accommodation? Jack hadn't considered the long-term plan. He'd been so focused on the immediate victories that the future remained nebulous. I'm not sure. I suppose that depends on Emma as much as Spirit. Well, you might want to figure out soon, Meyer advised. Or Miller mentioned that some university people are interested in documenting her case formally. They'll want to know what success looks like for this particular horse. Inside the barn, Emma methodically brushed Spirit's gleaming coat, her movements gentle but confident. 2 weeks had passed since the thunderstorm breakthrough, and each day had brought new progress. Spirit now accepted grooming from Emma, and Jack would follow Emma anywhere on the property, and had even begun interacting cautiously with Daisy, the elderly mare in the next stall. Olivia Parker, the trauma therapist, sat on a hay bale nearby, observing, but not interrupting. She'd been visiting 3 times a week, documenting Emma's progress. Alongside Spirit, you're doing a wonderful job, Emma, Olivia commented as the girl moved to brush Spirit's mane. He looks forward to your attention now. Emma nodded, patting Spirit's neck affectionately. I was wondering, Olivia continued casually, have you thought about whether you'd like to ride Spirit someday? Emma paused, considering the question. She reached for her notepad. When he's ready. That's very insightful, Olivia praised. Many people would focus on when they're ready, not when a horse is ready. How will you know when he's ready? Emma wrote again. He'll tell me, Olivia smiled. I believe he will. You understand each other remarkably well. After finishing the grooming session, Emma led Spirit to the small round pen Maya had set up for training exercises. Over the past week, they've been working on basic ground commands, moving forward, stopping, turning. Spirit learned quickly, eager to please his young handler Jack. And Mir joined Olivia at the round pen fence, watching as Emma asked Spirit to walk in a circle around her, connected by a long lead line. Her confidence has grown exponentially, Olivia observed 2 weeks ago. She wouldn't make eye contact with adults. Now she is directing be animal with clear, assertive body language. And speaking more, Jack added, not to us yet, but I hear her talking to Spirit all the time. That's a normal progression, Olivia assured him. Animals provide a non-judgmental audience. The transition to human conversation will come when she's ready. As they watched, Emma stop Spirit with gentle woe and hand signal, then rewarded him with a carrot piece. The Mustang lowered his head, blowing softly on her hair. In what seemed like affection, I've been meaning to ask, Jack said quietly to Olivia. School starts next month. The district's been accommodating with home instruction because of Emma's condition. But eventually you're wondering if she's ready for classroom integration. Olivia finished. Based on her progress, I'd recommend a gradual approach, perhaps starting with half days or even a trial period where she visits, but doesn't attend classes yet. And Spirit will separation set back their progress. That's the beauty of their relationship, Jack. They're helping each other become independent again, not codependent. A few hours apart each day would actually be healthy for both of them. Later that afternoon, Claire Wilson arrived with delivery of specialized feed she'd ordered for the sanctuary. Since witnessing Spirit's breakthrough with Emma, she'd become a regular volunteer, often spending her days off helping with chores and administrative tasks. The feed store donated an extra bag, she told Jack as they unloaded her truck. I might have mentioned that the university is doing a special study here. Jack chuckled, using our local fame to score donations. I like your style. Speaking of fame, Claire said, handing him an envelope. The Montana Horse Council called. They want Emma and Spirit to do a demonstration at next month's state fair. Jack took the invitation with surprise. A demonstration. They're not a trained performance team, not that kind of demonstration. CLA clarified, more educational, showing how patience and understanding can rehabilitate even the most traumatized horses. Dr. Miller recommended. You for it? I don't know. Jack hesitated. That's a big, noisy environment. Spirit, it might regress. The council is offering a substantial honorarium. Claire added they'd also feature the sanctuary in their publications. It could mean donation sponsors, financial stability. Jack finished thinking of the sanctuary's precarious accounts. Exactly. Plus, it would be an opportunity to educate people about wild horse issues. Isn't that part of your mission? Jack tucked the envelope into his pocket. I'll discuss it with Emma. Has to be her decision. That evening after dinner, Jack broached the subject with his granddaughter. The Horse Council has invited you and Spirit to the state fair. They want you to show people how you've been working with him. Emma's eyes widened with interest. It would mean trailering Spirit to Helena. Jack continued. Lots of people, unfamiliar surroundings. It might be difficult for him. And for you, Emma reached for a notepad. When next month, September 15th, she considered this, then wrote that. Gives us time to practice. Jack smiled at her practical response. You want to do it? Then Emma nodded, then added, Spirit can show people that scared doesn't mean dangerous. Jack felt a surge of pride. His granddaughter understood the deeper purpose of their work, changing perceptions about traumatized animals, and by extension, traumatized people. Will start preparing tomorrow. He promised the next few weeks brought intensive training sessions as they prepared Spirit for the challenges of the state fair. Maya designed a desensitization program, gradually introducing elements that might trigger anxiety, flapping flags, unexpected noises, strange objects, unfamiliar people. Dr. Miller documented everything, creating comprehensive records of Spirit's responses and progress. This could become a template for rehabilitating other traumatized Mustangs. She explained the methodical approach you're taking has applications far beyond one horse. Emma threw herself into the preparation with determination that surprised everyone. She created lists of potential triggers they needed to address, developed signals to communicate with Spirit from a distance, and even allowed more people to handle him under her supervision, building his comfort with strangers. One evening, as Jack was finishing paperwork in the kitchen, Emma entered with her notepad. Her message was direct. I want to ride Spirit before the fair. Jack looked up in surprise. Are you sure he's ready for that? Emma nodded confidently. He told me he is told. You? Jack raised an eyebrow. Emma smiled and wrote, not with words, but I know. The next day they gathered in a round pen, Jack, Maya, Dr. Miller, and Olivia, to witness what would be a watershed moment in Spirit's rehabilitation. Maya had helped Emma prepare a soft bareback pad, concerned that a full saddle might be too overwhelming for the Mustang's first riding experience. Emma LED Spirit into the round pen, the horse moving with the relaxed confidence that had gradually replaced his fearful tension. She spent time grooming him, whispering reassurances, establishing the connection that had become their foundation. She's setting him up for success, Maya observed, making sure he's completely comfortable before introducing something new. When Emma was satisfied with Spirit's readiness, she brought out the back pad, allowing him to sniff and investigated thoroughly. Before gently placing on his back, the Mustang flinched slightly, but remained steady, trusting his young handler, remarkable Dr. Miller. Murmured most formerly wild horses take months to accept a rider, even after they're comfortable with handling. After securing the Pad Emma LED Spirit to the mounting block, Maya had positioned in the center of the round pen. Jack held his breath as his granddaughter climbed the steps, now at shoulder height with the Mustang. "Be ready to move quickly," he whispered to Maya, who nodded in understanding, but their concern proved unnecessary. Emma leaned gently across Spirit's back, allowing him to feel her. Weight incrementally, the horse stood rock-steady, ears flicking occasionally, but showing no signs of distress. Gradually, Emma shifted more of her weight onto his back until she was lying across the pad. "She's doing everything textbook perfect," Maya said, admiringly slow, clear, progressive steps. After several minutes in this position, Emma sat up on the mounting block and looked directly at Jack, then at Olivia. Her meaning was clear. She wanted to actually sit on Spirit's back, and she wanted there. Approval. Olivia gave a slight nod. "She's earned the right to make this call. She knows him better than any of us." Jack swallowed hard, but nodded his permission. "Be careful, sweetheart." With deliberate movements, Emma swung her leg over Spirit's back and settled gently onto the pad. The Mustang's muscles quivered beneath her, but he remained still, his trust in the girl overriding instinctive fear. Emma leaned forward, stroking his neck, murmuring praise. "She did it," Jack whispered, emotion tightening his throat. She riding Spirit. After sitting quietly for several minutes, letting Spirit adjust to the new sensation, Emma gathered the lead rope she left attached to the halter and gave the softest of signals. The Mustang took one hesitant step forward, then another, carrying his young rider. In a slow circle around the round pen, no one spoke, as they witnessed the culmination of months of patience and trust. Emma's face shone with quiet joy, while Spirit moved with growing confidence, responsive to her lightest touch. When they completed their circuit, Emma guided Spirit to the center, stroked his neck once more, then smoothly dismounted. The adults burst into spontaneous applause, startling Spirit momentarily. Before Emma's calming hand reassured him, she turned to face her audience, and for the first time since arriving at the sanctuary, she spoke directly to her grandfather. "He did it," she said, her voice soft, but clear. He wasn't scared at all. Jack crossed the round pen in 3 strides and enfolded his granddaughter in a fierce hug, tears flowing freely down his weathered cheeks. "No, Emma, you both did." The day of the Montana State Fair arrived, crisp and clear, perfect September, weather drawing large crowds to the Helena Fairgrounds. Jack drove the sanctuary's truck with Spirit's trailer attached, while Emma sat beside him, reviewing her notes for the demonstration. "Nervous?" Jack asked. As they neared the fairgrounds, Emma shook her head, though her rapid page turning suggested otherwise. "It's okay to be a little scared," Jack assured her. "Spirit probably is too, but you'll help each other through it, just like always." When they arrived at the desert-designated unloading area, they found Dr. Miller already waiting with several horse council officials. The next hour passed in a flurry of activity, unloading Spirit, getting him settled in a temporary stall, checking the arena where they'd be performing, reviewing the program. Throughout it all, Emma remained at Spirit's side, a steady presence, keeping the Mustang calm despite the unfamiliar surroundings and noises. She spent weeks preparing him for this environment, and their practice was paying off as Spirit remained alert but not panicked, his trust in Emma evident. As the time for their demonstration approached, a surprising number of spectators filed into the stands surrounding the small arena. Jack recognized many faces from Eagles Landing, including Thomas Wilson, sitting stiffly in the front row, but most were strangers drawn by the compelling story of the girl and the Mustang. "Quite a turnout," Maya commented, joining them at the entrance gate. She driven separately with CLA to help manage the sanctuaries information booth. Word spread beyond Marcus's article. "Seems you two are minor celebrities." Emma blushed, burying her face against Spirit's neck. "You don't have to talk," Jack reminded her. "Dr. Miller and I will handle the narration. You and Spirit just show them what you do." When their introduction was announced, Jack led the way into the arena, followed by Dr. Miller with her presentation materials. Emma and Spirit entered last. Mustang's ears pricked forward with interest rather than fear. The girls' hand resting lightly on his neck, a hush fell over the crowd at the sight of them. The notorious unrideable Mustang walking calmly beside the small figure who had changed his life. Jack stepped to the microphone, his voice steady despite his nerves. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jack Coleman. This is my granddaughter Emma, and this is Spirit, a wild Mustang, who 6 months ago was deemed dangerous and destined for slaughter." As Jack shared their story, Emma and Spirit demonstrated the foundation of their Relationship, the mutual respect, the clear communication, the trust built through patience. Spirit performed each request, did task, willingly responsive to Emma's subtle cues. When she finally mounted and rode him in a simple pattern around the arena, the crowd erupted in applause. Dr. Miller took the microphone to explain the scientific significance of their work, but the academic details seemed secondary to the visible bond between girl and horse. As their demonstration concluded, the audience rose in a standing ovation, many wiping tears from their eyes. They get it. Maya whispered to Jack, "They see what you've accomplished here." After the arena cleared, several horse council officials approached with congratulations, and to Jack's surprise, checks representing donations from impressed spectators at university. Representative expressed interest in establishing an internship program at the sanctuary. A local feed company offered a year's sponsorship. But the most unexpected interaction came when Thomas Wilson approached hat in hand as they prepared to load Spirit for the journey home. That was something special. He said, genuine admiration in his voice changed some minds today, including mine. "Thank you, Thomas," Jack replied. "That means a lot." Wilson cleared his throat awkwardly. "Truth is, I've been thinking that land I've been trying to buy from you might serve a better purpose. As part of your UI." Jack stared, certain he'd misheard. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we could work something out. Conservation ease and perhaps keep the land in use for horse rehabilitation permanently." He glanced at Emma, who was securing Spirit's trailer. "Seems like important work, what you're doing there." As they drove home, the setting sun painting the Montana landscape in golds and purples. Jack glanced at his granddaughter, who was gazing contentedly out the window. "Proud of you, Emma." He said simply, "You showed a lot of courage today." She turned him with a small smile. Spirit showed more. Everything is scary for him, but he tries anyway. "You both inspire each other," Jack observed. "That's a gift." In the trailer behind them, Spirit traveled quietly, having conquered yet another fear. Like Emma, he was emerging from trauma, not by forgetting the past, but by finding the courage to build a new future, one step at a time. Around a bend in the road, the sanctuary came into view, nestled in its valley with mountains rising beyond. Home for a retired veterinarian finding new purpose, a silent girl finding her voice, and a wild Mustang finding peace he'd never known before. Spirit was right, you know, Emma said softly, about what sometimes the things that scares the most are the things we need the most. She reached over and took her grandfather's weathered hand in her small one. Like family, Jack squeezed her hand gently, words unnecessary between them. Now, as they turned down the sanctuary's driveway, he reflected that despite all its challenges, life had a way of bringing together the broken pieces to create something new and beautiful, something even stronger than before. Later that evening, after Spirit was settled back in the stall with an extra portion of hay as a reward, Jack sat on the porch with Maya and CLA, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I still can't believe how well it went," Maya said, sipping her coffee. Spirit, in that busy environment, with all those strangers watching a month ago, it would have been unthinkable. Emma, too, Claire added, standing in front of all those people, demonstrating their work together. The girl who wouldn't make eye contact when I first met her. Jack nodded, his chest tight with pride. They're good for each other. Each one give the other courage. Inside the house, Emma sat at the kitchen table writing in a journal Olivia had given her since beginning to speak again. She'd been encouraged to record her thoughts and feelings about the journey with Spirit tonight. She had much to document. The phone rang and Jack excused himself to answer it. When he returned to the porch, his expression was thoughtful. That was Marcus in the Gazette. "Seems our little demonstration is garnering attention beyond Montana. A national magazine wants to do a feature on Emma and Spirit." "That's wonderful," CLA exclaimed. "Think of the awareness it could raise for wild horse issues and for trauma recovery approaches." Maya added, "This could help a lot of children and a lot of horses." Jack sighed. "That's what I keep reminding myself, but part of me worries about too much attention. Emma's still healing, so is Spirit."